Welcome to Grace Church, a fellowship that's been serving the South Coast for over 23 years. Grace Church is more than a congregation. They're a family of believers who are ready to welcome you to a place where you can feel the tangible grace of God. Join Grace Church every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for a time of contemporary worship and a relevant message from the Word of God. For more information, please visit gchurch.us. And now here's Pastor Ron Moore with this week's timely message.
So who has the reins? I found this on the internet. I'm learning that when I give him the reins, my focus becomes his reign in my life, and whether the reins bring blessing or calamity. Those of you that know these things, I understand that this is called a homophone. Homophone. It means words that have the same pronunciation. And I kind of thought, I wonder if all these go together. Like, I wonder if there's some sort of etymology there that would pull them all together, and I'm not really sure about that. But I want to talk to you about the word meek. Everybody wants to be viewed as strong. No matter what, you don't want to be viewed as somebody who can just be ran over. And that is basically the job of the enemy, is to make you feel less than what God created you to be. But and we all have strengths. You know, I used to my superhero was Superman because, well, back in my day there was only one superhero, and that was Superman. That was it. Here lately we've got whole armies of superheroes. All of them have all kinds of different traits, different things that they can do, and but really we have a superpower. Each one of us do. It could be brawn, just big. My neighbor lives behind me. He's amazing. He's just a gentle giant. I don't know. He's well over 6 feet tall, and I always look at him. I think you could be so overpowering, especially if you're short like I am. You could be so overpowering, and yet here you are, just ministering, just blessing people in the area. It could be your influence. A lot of people have influence. If you're not strong, sometimes you try to get your strength from influence. And how can I get influential? A lot of people want to be leaders because leadership has a certain amount of influence there. I had thought of another one. I thought about beauty. We're using people's beauty, whether it's male or female. That sex sells everything. And I think that God created all those things. I think He created people to be influential and to be leaders. I think that's a gift of God. I believe that strength, that God uses strength. I always think about my son and nephew back there. They're just huge guys, and it's so amazing because they're both just teddy bears. They really are. It's amazing to me. They don't use that strength to try to overbear anybody. But we all have our superpowers. The problem is when we misuse what God's given to us. So whatever God has given to us, whether it's supernatural or natural, how many know, I haven't got time to go with this, you have supernatural gifts and you have natural gifts. And everybody has a natural gift because you're made in the image of God. And we also have supernatural gifts that God has given us. But the definition of sin really is this: is taking a godly desire and fulfilling it in an ungodly way. To have sin in your life means that you've taken something that is a godly desire. If you think about all the sins, there's something about that was given to you by God, but you try to fulfill it in a wrong way. That's the whole point of the matter, isn't it? I mean, when you're big, you can use your voice. You can scream and yell. Men have this deal, where we want to get things explained well. We want to yell at everybody, and women might use their beauty to get their way. I don't know. There's always something that we can do, but we use whatever God has given us. We use it for either our own purposes or ungodly purposes. And what I want to talk to you today is about using what God has given you to honor God. So if he's given you these gifts, whatever your gift is, if you think about how has God blessed me, and that is the way that I can bless others. The Sermon on the Mount is basically this. It's 8 attributes how to have a blessed life. I've told you this before. I've kind of glossed over the whole idea of the Beatitudes. I know they're inspired in the Word of God, but I happen to know the New Testament basically ends at the cross. And so everything prior to the cross is part of the law, and that a lot of things that Jesus said had to do with the law. And that gets theological, and I don't need to get into that because every word is good, and the law didn't disappear. The law just got confirmed by Jesus. But he says there's 8 things that you do. This has nothing to do with the law. It has to do with Jesus and giving his strategy statements. Was when he talked about I come to heal the sick, raise the dead, and all that stuff. But this is basically his mission. His mission he gives us in just 8 sentences that sound counterproductive, and sometimes I don't even understand. So I would just gloss over it. So I've been taking these apart, and I want you to know that the word blessed, we talked about last week, the word blessed means this is happiness the world can't take from you. So when you have happiness that the world can't take from you, you're going to find that it has very little to do with things of this world, but things above. So if you come to a place, we were talking about, I had a lot of anxiety yesterday, and a lot of it was because I was living in the moment and not in what God's done for us. Matthew 5:5 says, blessed is the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And I doubt any of you got up this morning and said, you know what I need is more meek. If I could just get a little bit more meek, I would feel better about myself. I just want to get meek. I need meekness. There ought to be classes on meekness. And we don't want anybody to think we're meek because what do you think meek means? Well, in English, it means weak. Right? My grandkids, when I had knee surgery and I couldn't walk, we were at Disneyland, they got me a wheelchair. And I said, I feel awkward in a wheelchair. And they said, no, it'll be good for you. And I got in the wheelchair, and then they mocked me the rest of the week. They couldn't wait. They called me Snowflake, Grandpa Snowflake, actually for years after that. But I want to tell you quickly so we can get into the sermon. This is a big idea for today. This is the number one thing, that meekness is not weakness, it's strength under control. Say that with me. It's strength under control. Say it again. It's strength under control. You got to remember that because our English word for meek does not mean strength under control. Now, a lot of people ask me, how do you get information? Where do you get your sermons from? What are you doing? And a lot of it has to do with reading a lot and looking at articles and things. And so I'm just going to give you a few of these things. And I don't know exactly when that slide comes up. Is it next? Let's show that slide. So this is some stuff I just cut out of different articles I've been reading this week. And especially since Wednesday. A guy named Matt Norman, he does a lot of research. He said in ancient Greek, the word praus, which is the word meekness, praus, described a horse that had been conditioned for war. Now that doesn't sound right. See? Do you think of that when you think of the word meek? Would you think that's a horse conditioned for war? Okay. He said Aristotle said that a praus person, not a proud, but praus is actually what he said. Praus person is one who has a virtue, a mean, which is the middle, a happy medium, between two extremes. In other words, you have reckless on one side and you would have cowardice on the other. That praus is in the middle someplace. Not a coward, but not reckless. Okay. He calls it steady courage. There's an article out in 2022 called The Nature Walk with God. I really like it. It's all about horses, and it says they should be meek like a horse. So the old English term for meekness is meeking a horse. So if you were to look at 1600s, when the Bible was written, they would talk about meeking a horse. Now, when I read this, I thought, that can't be right, and I've got to call Mike Ledoux and find out if he's ever meeked a horse. And I thought, well, he probably wasn't alive. He's not a young man, but I don't think he was alive in the 1620s. Probably not. Yeah, well, you were young. And so meeking a horse, and this is what it says. It did not mean to strip the power from the horse, but to harness the horse's power. You see the difference here? It's not to take away the power of the horse, it's to harness the horse's power. Take him from a state of wild independence, this is just his words, a wild independence to one of loyalty, so that the horse could be used. So that the master, as the master of the horse intended. So whatever the master of this horse, the owner of the horse, whatever he intends for that horse to do, he could meek that horse to do that. We call it maybe training. There's another article called The Invitation of Fathers, came out in 2021. It says the Greek word for meek is praus, we've already talked about. It was a word borrowed from the military that relates to horse training. Now here's what he says about it. The Greek army would find the wildest horses in the mountains and bring them in to be broken in. After months of training, they sorted them into 4 different groups. Number 1, some were discarded. I think they were eaten. I'm not sure about that, but I think they were. Some were discarded. Some were broken, useful for bearing burdens only, because the training broke them. Some were used for ordinary duty, transportation. In other words, they were broken, they had a little spirit, they could be used to haul people around. The 4th group was the fewest of them all, and these graduated. They were called war horses. That's what they were. They were war horses, and a war horse passed the conditioning required by the war horse. In a state, it was described as this horse is now praus. This horse has been meeked. This horse is meek. So when we talk about reading this, they translate this word praus to meekness, probably it doesn't make as much sense in this day and age English as it did back then. So meek is that praus, it's strength under control. In a book called Train for Battle by Tim Kite in 2020, he said this: praus horses could gallop into battle 35 miles an hour and come to a sliding stop with just a word. See, you'd have to let go of the reins on that horse in order to fight. They would not be frightened by chaos of combat. They would run into battle in the midst of arrows, spears, shields, and fiery torches. I listened to Bill Johnson speak about this several years ago, and I finally found it. He read this verse out of Zechariah. He said, "For the Lord of the heavenly armies has arrived to look after Judah." Praise. I can't talk about praise right now. That's good. He's come to look after his praise. That's what God is doing. And he'll make the strong glorious and proud like a war horse in battle. And he says this. He said that these war horses were so trained that they could hear the sound of battle. And they could smell the battle. How many know that would have been a bloody mess? Have you ever been around a horse? I used to hunt from a horse when I was a kid, much younger. And this horse I had was a Palomino horse, and it was great for hunting. In fact, that horse, I could shoot off the horse, and it had been trained for hunting that if you shot the bullet, it wouldn't jump. Some of them it would be a rodeo. And this horse was great, except one time I killed a deer, and I thought, oh, it's so good to have a horse here. And I thought this horse had been trained to also pack deer out. But that horse did not like dead deer. He didn't like dead anything, I found out later. And I tried to put that on, and I'm telling you, it was a circus that happened after that. I had to take a length of rope, I know it was 50 feet long, a length of this building, and drag that deer behind that horse to get him out of the mountains, because that horse didn't like to get along with dead things. These horses would fight, would run into the smell of battle. They literally he says it this way, they literally galloped into war, and they had an appetite for conflict. There are stories of war horses that have been left, the soldiers left them next to a building that was on fire, these war horses, and where the horses, part of their hide was burned and singed because they wouldn't budge from where their master told them to stand. I like this so far. Blessed are the meek, for they're going to inherit the earth. Oh, we thought we would just sit back and let the government do, or the certain societies do, or the culture do. We'll just stand back and we'll sing Kumbaya. Never. How many have ever said this? Boy, Jesus sure was a meek man. Or Jesus sure was a weak man. No, he was anything but weak. Listen, Jesus changed the entire world. Sometimes with whip. They didn't fidget at all when there was difficulty around. They held their course and held their focus. So a proud horse, a prouse horse is a strong, determined, passionate, but learned to control its nature. It was disciplined, calm, responsive to the slightest touch of the rider. That's what all these things said. Basically, it's this. Training a horse to be praus involved moving from a state of wild independence into a state of loyalty. Because that's the first part. Basically, the sermon chart's here, but it's not going to go there. Meekness is strength under control. And so if you look at Jesus' life, you realize that he was not, he could be talked about. He wasn't out of control. See, Jesus was never out of control, but he was always in control. But he was never weak. Like when he needed to be strong, he was strong. When he needed to step back, he stepped back. He was always under control. I wish I was under control. My emotions get hold of me, and I find myself, man, you're just out of control here. Mostly on the highway. Most of the time. Most of the time. I'm going to hurry through here. Let's go down to where it says harshness. Because the opposite of praus in our lives, under control, is harshness. And what harshness does, it can drive you to short-term results, but it can have long-term results. In other words, you can get things done quickly. Strength under control is not harshness. Harshness is strength out of control. Short-term results lead. You can drive short-term results, but it doesn't lead into. But it'll lead into long-term destruction. I'm trying to get hurried here, so let's turn this. This is not in your notes because this is where things get a little bit messy. So hang on to me for about 10, 15 minutes here. In Mark chapter 5, it said this. It says this is talking about Jairus and his daughter. And they come to him and they say, your daughter, it's not in your notes, but it's Mark 5:35. Your daughter's dead, so why bother the teacher anymore? And Jesus overheard what they were talking about, and he said to the leader, don't listen to them, just trust me. That's the message, and I like it the best because it says have faith. But sometimes when we talk about faith, it just gets kind of ethereal. But I believe what Jesus was trying to get around to is he just needed them to trust him. Just don't fall apart right now. Just trust me. In everything, we find ourselves saying, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do. What if this happened? Just trust him. That's all he asks you to do. It's a key. It's a key that unlocks meekness, is praus in our life. Psalms 37. Let me read this to you. It's kind of long, but I want to read it to you. In Psalms 37, verse 1, he says, do not fret. That's a pretty good, it could all be up to that. Just do not fret. Don't be anxious for anything. Yesterday, when I was also anxious, I found myself at night, at evening, I was sitting down, and I was just a turmoiled mess, emotionally a mess, and I realized I probably should go in and look at my sermon, and the first thing I read was, do not fret. Don't fret! You know what's going on around me? You know what's happening? That kind of stuff. You ever do that to God? And you think, well, maybe God will get out of control with me. Well, he never does. That's irritating. My wife is like that. Sometimes I get all, just going everywhere, and she says, oh, calm down. Oh, man, I hate that. Because he says this. He says, don't fret because those days are evil, or envious of those who do wrong. Like the grass, they'll soon wither. Like green plants, they'll soon die away. He says, trust. Everybody say trust. Trust. Say it again. Trust. Man, wouldn't it be good if things were falling apart around us and we just say trust? Trust. We just got to trust God. That's all there is. Trust in the Lord and do good. Oh, I mean, I got to trust and do something. Dwell in the land, enjoy safe pasture, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your ways to the Lord and trust. There it is again. Trust in him. And then he says, do not fret. I can't imagine why. Commit to the Lord, trust in him, and he will do his will. He'll make your righteous reward. Listen, in verse 8, 7, he says this, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him and do not fret. For when wicked people succeed in their ways and they carry off their wicked schemes and refrain from evil and turn from wrath and do not fret. And then he goes on and says this, it only leads to evil. Sometimes the political landscape of our country it almost is psychotic. I mean, one moment I think, hey, everything's going to be good, and the next moment, oh my goodness, what are they doing now? And now that we got, well, look, something else good has happened. But do you ever feel that way? He says, be still before the Lord, wait patiently for him. If you fret, it leads to evil. Look at verse 37. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. That is so important, he says that. They're going to inherit the land. Now, when he wrote this, most of the people in Psalmist David was saying, well, we'll get the promised land completely ours. But maybe that's what he meant. In a little while, and the wicked will be no more, and they'll look for them, and they'll not be found. And this is verse 11, but the meek will inherit the earth, land. That's just like what Jesus said. In fact, Jesus must have been quoting this. He said, if you want to be happy, this is the way you do it, and the meek will inherit the land. Now, he just said, don't fret. So when we think about meek people, these are meek people are people who fret all the time, or worry all the time, or are anxious all the time. And that's not what we found out that meek meant. But the meek will inherit the land. He's saying, but those that have our power under control can inherit the land. And he goes on to say, and enjoy peace and prosperity. That's always good too, because we like the peace and prosperity part. Because everybody really what we want is peace and we want prosperity. And every political party will promise you peace and prosperity. So blessed are the meek, they're going to inherit the earth. Last point. Meekness has a reward, God's full blessing. Absolutely, its entire blessing. Psalmist David said, using this phrase, inheriting the land, he was speaking of peace and prosperity, the full blessing. Your inner peace and your outer peace. God, I want you to know this, God's going to win the day. Sometimes I wonder if he is, I mean, we think we ought to fight evil with evil, and that will win the day. Well, these people are saying this, and I'm going to stand up and say this. I'm going to get on Facebook, and I'm going to counteract what they're saying with evil. When I was 20 years old, I was looking for any job that didn't involve working outside. And some guy said, hey, have you ever been a salesman? I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, the Kirby is training vacuum cleaner salesmen. So I went to this class. I never did that, but I went to the class, and the first thing they said, what's the other one beside Kirby that's a vacuum cleaner? Hoover. That's it. They said, don't ever try to sell a Kirby to anybody who's got a Hoover. I've thought about that a lot. If somebody's already sold on something else, it's hard to sell them on that. And so we get on and we think we're going to match wits with the devil. Well, the kid's song tells you right off the bat, the devil is a sly old fox. He's hard to back into a corner. And so you can have all your little witty posts you want and feel really good about yourself like you did something, but all you did was fight evil with evil and show that you don't trust God, because God will win the day. Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The second thing is eventually, I love this word, God will win the day eventually. We want God to win the day today. Like, this will be a good time to win. And God's going to win. I like this word, Galatians 4:4. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his son. There was a lot of bad days between when he said he was coming and when he got here. But God knew exactly the time, the very set time. Eventually, we're going to take care of it. How many know that our friend, Jeff, had heart problems even before he knew it, but God already knew he had a heart problem? Aren't you glad that God knows it all and he can make things work out for our good because we love the Lord? That's good. Put him in the right spot. There was only, I thought, that's maybe one of the better places to have a heart attack. Right on the highway, straight up the hill. I mean, the only better one would have been in the hospital. And God could have put him there for some reason. But see, God will win the day eventually in the fullness of time. And this is when, if we will trust him to set things right. And I can tell you that I don't trust God is going to set things right. Proverbs says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him and he'll make your paths straight. That says, blessed are meek because they're going to inherit the earth. When we trust in the Lord, listen, when we trust in the Lord, it's going to make everything okay. But the problem is we're not sure he's good. We're not sure God's really awake and alert and active. And his word is true. And it doesn't come back void. We're not really sure about that. We know it says it, but we don't act like it because we haven't ever trusted in the Lord, because we're pretty good pack horses, but we haven't become trained enough to become a war horse. And I think God needs in this day and age is he doesn't need pack mules. That's a better way of saying it there, but I'm not going to say it that way. But he needs war horses. Think about why, Lord, aren't we inheriting what you've offered us? You said we'd get the whole earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. Well, why aren't we getting it? And here's what I believe. It may be because we're out of control, or at least this. Maybe God's not in control. Maybe it's us, maybe we're out of control, or maybe we're not allowing God to get into control. I'm thinking this really strongly right now, and this is why this whole thing has changed my life, and I've got about 5 minutes here. I'm saying yes to what I don't even know yes is. Because if I try to get into control, how many know that really I'm out of control and definitely God's not in control? And we think we have it all figured out, and we got God in this box, and we say, as long as you stay within my control, you can be in control as long as you're in my control. But God said, I want out of the box and let loose. I heard somebody talking about Aslan. You remember the wardrobe, the witch, something. Lion. Aslan, they said he's not dangerous, but he's not tame. Speaking of Jesus, he's not dangerous, he's not going to hurt you, but he certainly isn't going to make you feel good at times. Those of you with prayer meeting last month, I got up, had one of those unexpected anointings hit me. Just one of those things. It was a relatively easy, nice prayer meeting we were having. And I stood up, and God spoke to me about lions, and that lions quit roaring. I didn't know this, but if you put a lion in a zoo long enough, they will eventually lose their roar because they're caged in. Now, I didn't do any fact checking like I did on the horse, but that's what they told me. And I said, the anointing hit me when I said that. And I said, I think we all stand up. This is a whole church full of evangelicals, non-evangelicals, charismatics, non-charismatics, a whole group of people. And I said, you know what I think, man? I think we need to sneak it up and roar once. Just allow the Holy Spirit to move through us. And the whole place just stood up and roared. What time is it? I was over at K-Light this week, and I was talking to Rick. And he said, man, what got into you? And I said, what? I'd forgotten. He said, at the prayer meeting. And I said, yeah. He said, remember when you got up? And I said, yeah, I'd forgotten. He said, you had us all roaring like lions? See, every once in a while I think that God wants out of the box and you a little bit out of control. Me. Okay. This is where I'm going to close. 4 minutes and 13 seconds. Hang on. How many remember we were just in a national election? And a lot of promises were made and a lot of things were thrown around. I mean, this is what I get. This is the main argument between the Dems and the reps. You know what I'm talking about? We can do better with infectious diseases than you can. We can provide a better health care than you can. We can manage the world's energy resources better than you can. We can protect wealth better than you can. We can keep people from hating each other better than you can. We can make the world safer from the world enemies than you can. We know how to define marriage, law, and sex better than you can. We can do better with the homeless than you can. We have all the better answers. So we stand wide-eyed after all of that for several months, and we have to decide which party can do better than the other party, because, see, everybody is trying to get control of the earth. And Jesus didn't tell us that the best politics will get control of the earth. Now, I want to tell you, just so you know, in case you're worrying, I'm very conservative, and I vote accordingly, and I'm not ashamed of it, but I happen to know this, no matter how I voted, that doesn't make it better. Only the meek, those that are in control, can truly control the world. Hitler thought he could control the world. All of these people in our history wars have been fought over who can control the world. I heard them say the other day that the president was the most powerful in the world. Wrong. The meek, those that are trained for battle, those that are controlled by the Spirit, those that can stand in the time of turmoil, those, even though the fire is coming against them, they'll run into war instead of running away from it. Those are the ones that are going to control this world. You say, well, when? Well, eventually, in the fullness of time. Could be tomorrow. We don't know. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We just had a tsunami alert. They told me this parking lot was filled with people all up here. Every parking space was filled up here with people because they were afraid of the tsunami. There was all kinds of stories. Brandon's got a really funny story about people running around in a gas station running around. He said it was just ridiculous. People were telling, in front of my house, the police had to come and open the road up because they clogged up the road. They were so panicked they all met in the road at one time right in front of my house trying to get to the Catholic church to pick up their children from the high school and the junior high. So upset. They're not wrong to be upset. I think you ought to take care of yourself. And you hear a tsunami alarm go off, take off, man. But here's the real point, is that the world can change in a moment. See, I think we're in a custody battle for the control of the planet. And I think we've got all kinds of ways to do that. And I'm asking God, what's the way to do it? And he said, I think you need to be strong. See, I think God gave me these verses on the horses, or these articles on the horses, because he wanted to tell us, as this church, how are we going to, see, we were told to change, to actually win North Bend to Jesus Christ. And I got on this Zoom call, actually it was a FaceTime call with this pastor up in Port Angeles, and he said, we have made such an impact on this town. They haven't all come to Christ, but they all know about Christ, and they all know what a church can do. And we did it because we got trucks and pickups and went around, and we picked up homeless refuge from all the parks, all the roadways, and we do that on a continuous basis. And all of a sudden, the city is looking toward us because we weren't out of control. We're not at the council meetings screaming and yelling, we want them out of our yard. Are you following me? Now, I'm not saying that we're going to go around and clean anything up, but I am telling you this. Lord, whatever you want us to do, we want you to be in control. Whatever it is, we want you to be in control. If you're here today, it's obviously because you need to hear this. I know I've needed to hear this. And I believe the enemy would do anything he can to be talking to you about, no, this is crazy. I believe that we need to be trained. We need to allow the Holy Spirit to train us to be power under control. Stand with me. I believe that the only way to be meek, listen, this meek, the only way to be this meek is, first of all, you got to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Not just somebody who says, I'm a Christian. You have to be somebody who is actually following.
We hope you've enjoyed this message from Grace Church. Make sure to stay connected throughout the week online at gchurch.us and on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.